Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
My dear brother, it's really an honor to see you in person. SubhanAllah, I've seen you multiple times on television, and now to have you here three-dimensional, it's like unreal.
No, pleasure is for me. The same goes for you. MashaAllah, Allahumma barak. I see like the dress code is there, the setup is there. Like, it's really an honor to be here, and I feel I've been upgraded.
That's really kind of you, especially knowing how much experience you have and all the things you were involved in, mashallah. I started this podcast just to give you a bit of perspective in order to allow a more nuanced perspective of who Muslims are and what Islam is in the public arena. As you know, myself being an Islamophobe before I converted to Islam about 15 years ago, I know that it's not that difficult to pierce through the ignorance and the hatred that people may have towards Muslims, but it requires sophistication and an approach that allows them to have alternative perspectives and opinions about who Muslims are. And one of the best ways to do it, I think, is through video. So thanks again for coming, because Islamophobia is something you understand very well. You have tons of experience, and perhaps we can start about there, if you can share a little bit your experience and your background.
Of course. So my background is far away from Islamophobia. I studied mathematics, applied mathematics, whether it be statistics or probabilities. So my background is in that area. But very early on, it gave me kind of an analytical approach to any issue I try to address, any issue I try to tackle. So when it comes to forms of contemporary racism, whether it be against Arab people, against black people, against Asian people, against Muslims or Jews, for me, it's just like one big equation of sorts that we have to cope with, deal with, and solve. So that's how I got involved in the first place. After a few years in finance, I was volunteering for an NGO that was addressing anti-Muslim hatred in France, Islamophobia, and I got right into it because they needed someone to first translate some of their speeches into English and have a critical look at their reporting. And when I saw some of the data, I knew that really we could significantly do better in accounting for discrimination cases, hate crime cases. And that's how I jumped into it altogether and spent 10 to 12 years working on different forms of discrimination, but mainly Islamophobia.
That's fascinating. It reminds me of the quote that the one who's good with a hammer sees everything as a nail, because your career, your job, your specialty will have a huge impact on the type of work you do and the way you do that work, which makes me think about a follow-up question. What is one of the most important skills in your experience that somebody needs in order to get seriously organized within a community framework where you're trying to advocate for your rights or trying to mobilize people to create positive change?
Yeah, problem solving for me is like the key skill that I would have any NGO leader trained in. Why? Because there is a risk, and quite a significant one, in entertaining the cause. So basically you would have NGOs or even community leaders who feel that their whole power, their whole legitimacy with respect to a community is in the continuity of the actual issue they are trying to address, or so they say, or so they claim. And sometimes with the best of intentions, we live for a specific cause, and this cause ends up defining us to the point where we lose sight of what exactly we're trying to achieve. So my point is, any NGO addressing a specific problem should plan for disappearing, being irrelevant at some point, because they have actually solved the issue. I don't want to be giving out food to poor people. I want no more poor people in the city. I want to solve the issue of having access to housing, access to food, access to education. I don't want to be there 20 years from now receiving prizes and congratulations because we're doing good in an area that shouldn't even exist. So any NGO, any organization trying to address an issue, whether it be discrimination, poverty, housing, lack of education, healthcare issues, should plan for being irrelevant in 20 years from now. What should we do? What problem do we solve? How do we solve it to make sure that it disappeared and we can move on now to the next task, and then to the next task, and then to the next task? So this problem-solving approach, for me, whether it be from an analytical standpoint or methodological standpoint, is essential
Key.
so that NGOs exist, solve, and move on to the next issue.
It's really interesting. So you're talking about problem solving, but I do see a little bit of learning to create systems and a mechanism that makes it able for us to run the marathon as opposed to the sprint. I couldn't agree more with you. And I'd like to ask, what is the best way, in your opinion, to create system-dependent organization rather than people-dependent? Is it only through problem solving, or is it something else?
Yeah, there is a sense of ownership of a cause, of an issue, that needs to be widely spread. Most of the time, especially within Muslim communities or any minority community, people rely on people, and people rely on individuals to uphold a cause. And generally speaking, whatever we say, however we say it, people tend to have like this emotional, human, completely natural connection to the fact that we are inspired by the community leader, we are inspired by the imam, we are inspired by the teacher, by the sister, by the person who actually speaks truth to power, makes sense of the hardship that we are going through. And this makes a strong bond. But this bond plays in both directions. It can mobilize and motivate a lot of people, and it can take away a form of individual responsibility, because some people say, hey, what's the point of getting involved? This sister is taking care of business. This brother is taking care of it. This organization is making the whole work. Let's donate once a year. Let's make dua for them. Let's be there for the gala or the event or the charity dinner. And then 364 days out of the year, we do nothing. And I respect and I commend this type of involvement.
As value.
But we should be involved all together in the system, and each one of us plays a specific role. And we shouldn't rely on the individuals, because we're doing two bad things in that case. We put huge pressure on them. And it's only a matter of time before they burn out or just get away from the project. And we take away a form of collective responsibility, in that every one of us at his or her level should do his part. And it's not only about like giving charity donation once a year. It's about like giving it all, giving your skills, giving your time, giving your du'as, giving your disponibility and your availability to make sure that your contribution is taken in. And then it becomes a system of change. Instead of being a group of individuals leading a cause, it becomes a system of change, and this change cannot be stopped, because you can get rid of an individual. He can have a personal issue or a health issue, God forbid, but you don't get rid of the system, because the system is based on so many different individuals that it's just a matter of like change players, change strategy, adjust, and go right to the objective.
It makes so much sense what you're saying, because imagine a country, if the prime minister or the president was to leave and the whole country was to disintegrate, what would that tell you about the institutions of that country? I mean, it's probably not where you want to go and move.
For sure.
So it tells us a lot about the condition of the Muslim community, the Muslim world, because I couldn't agree more. We tend to rally around a strong man to kind of lead us towards victory. But when that person disappears, it's like everything disintegrates. And it's kind of sad, but if we're going to have a mature conversation about this topic, we really have to dive deep into it and, dissect it with surgical precision, because I think that's the heart of the issue for us. And we see the Muslim world right now. We're going through a lot of humiliations, a lot of defeats, and it's very disempowering for Muslims out there in the world. When they look at the status quo, it feels almost as if they're going into an uphill battle that they just can't climb. So if you're talking to someone right now who's losing hope and says it's pointless and like, no, Muslims cannot do anything about it because we're at a disadvantage and we just don't know how to get organized, what would you tell them?
Never meant to be easy. It never was. Who said it should be easy? Who said it should be a downhill process? It's not. And Islam never said that things are going to be easy. Things are going to like flow and go with the flow. It's not like that. Never said it would be easy. We said it would have meaning. We said it would have purpose. For it to have purpose, cannot be kind of a promenade and a stroll. It cannot be like that. So when people find purpose in hardship, that's where the process begins. Because we know that our religion, our faith, our values are fit for adverse condition. And since the beginning of Islam, you have like this balance in the deen, where the deen and the daily acts of practice are made easy. you have only like 5 prayers a day. You just need to behave, avoid backbiting, avoid doing bad stuff, don't talk ill of people and all that. And if you're doing just that bare minimum, you're safe. You're a good person. But social change is tough. From the beginning, you're looking at adverse conditions. Muslims are the slaves, the poorest, the minority within the tribe system of Quraysh of the time. And they are outnumbered in any possible way, in any economic, political, military way, but still they have purpose because they understand that in that path there is meaning. In that path there is a higher objective that gives a sense to the hardship that they are going through, and that they are not defined by the asymmetry of means to define the symmetry of results. So when people are finding themselves in a situation of hardship, I'm just taking away this fake idea that it should be easy. Yeah, it's difficult. So what? Well, if I speak up on Palestine, I'm going to lose a contract. So what? They are losing their lives.
SubhanAllah.
You're losing a contract. You're losing a sponsor. You're receiving a bad comment on Facebook. That's what your stake is. So it's difficult to raise money for making a soup kitchen in that area. So what? We're going to let people starve. My boss doesn't think that I should get involved in it. So what? I didn't ask for his permission to address social change in a specific area of the country. So when we take away the idea that everything has to be easy, everything has to be cool, everything has to be like really relying on just like click on this button and everything will change, that's where the actual work begins.
These are really inspiring words, and it reminds me of the fact that there is no change without sacrifices. And truth be told, like every time we say like ihdina sirat al-mustaqim and we ask Allah to guide us towards the right path, in reality what we're asking is for the courage to have the ability to act on guidance when it comes to us. And oftentimes guidance doesn't always come in the way that we want. There's this beautiful prayer that says, you know, I asked God for strength and he gave me problems to resolve. I asked God for love and he gave me broken people to help. I asked God for wisdom and he gave me hardship. I'm paraphrasing here. And what you're saying really reminds me of this. Now, my question to you is, obviously in the West, we're comfortable. We have abundancy. We have lots of luxuries. And in so many ways, not to say that this is bad, but it has a way of creating interference between our connection with Allah. How? Well, we start thinking that our paycheck is our ilah. We start thinking that all the materialistic things we have will take care of us. And if that's gone, then we'll be at a disadvantage. As a matter of fact, you see a lot of people compromising their faith simply because there's this argument that we need to become rich.
For sure.
But when I think about Malcolm X and his story, who had a huge impact on me, he was broke most of his life when he was actually, all of his life actually, when he was having a major impact and speaking at all the Ivy Leagues and walking around the world like an ambassador, for Islam. What is your take on that? What's your outlook on that?
Yeah. So basically, many of us, whether we come from South America, Africa, or South Asia, for many of us, once again, were the first or second generation to be out of poverty. So there is this huge pressure, family pressure, and it's not I don't mean it in a negative way, that we should keep our family safe, economically, socially, because we still have in vivid memory what it means to be broke. We know how our parents were working so hard. We know the sacrifices they had to make. Yeah. So our first responsibility, even in the choice of studies, is get the money and get it to a safe place where nobody in our children and our grandchildren will ever have to do this again. Risk his life again for a piece of bread. Work in a mine or a factory and get cancer at 40 years old. So, of course, this is coming from the right place. But it doesn't define us. And sometimes it creates a form of comfort and of fear of losing this comfort that blocks us in every way possible, not only from a materialistic and social change standpoint, but also from a religious perspective, as you were saying. Because you start thinking, I did this. I got the job. I got the money. I took care of business. Nobody took care of business. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you your rizq. And whether it be a piece of bread and hummus, or whether it be like fancy food at a restaurant, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for you. And just like He provided, He can take away in an instant. So remember that anytime you start eating, and that's why we say Bismillah. Remember that when you finish eating. That's why we say Alhamdulillah. And so this idea of comfort becoming a prison of sorts for us, we need to get rid of. I have like this anecdote. When I was working in finance and I was like in a dealing room, and like it was the apex predator, professionally speaking, at the time, because everybody wanted to become a trader or a quantitative analyst, and we were there. But we kept remembering that whenever we win money, someone is losing it somewhere. And at the time, it was Argentinian families, because we were making money on trading algorithms, and the ones losing their savings and all that were most of the time on that trade, Argentinian families. And so at some point, I started having like moral dilemmas. Should I stay in this job? Should I leave? I cannot pray 5 salawat a day and not care about the impact of the financial transactions I'm conducting for the bank. So I spoke to my wife about this, and she said something like resonates with me up until today. She said, imagine that we lose everything. We lose the job. We lose the money. We were working in Tokyo at the time. It was like amazing. One of the best time from couple and family standpoint. We lose the degrees we have. We lose the bank account we have. We even lose the passports. We lose everything material that we care so much about, that people care so much about. What's the end game here? That we're going to live on the countryside and work at Tim Horton or McDonald's and make delivery and eat hummus and bread and rice? That's your nightmare? That's what you're afraid of? That's how we live right now. Whatever salary you have, this is our food. This is what we live on. This is the floor we sleep on. And I couldn't care less about all the fancy stuff in the world as long as it makes sense for us. When I heard that, it freed me completely, because I know that never will I be defined by the brand of my watch, the brand of my shirt, the length of my pants, the speed, the theoretical speed of the car. And I couldn't care less. And once you know that, then discomfort doesn't become something that curtails you, blocks you, chains you. It's just something you enjoy, that you are thankful for, but it can be taken away in 30 seconds like it never existed.
It's crazy how many insights are going through my head by listening to you speak, because it's so true and it's such an important reminder. And I can't help but to remember the famous quote of Umar ibn Khattab, where he said that before Islam, we were a debased people, and I'm paraphrasing here, we were humiliated. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us Islam to honor us. And as soon as we try to seek honor with anything else, Allah will humiliate us. And I think, not to make things oversimplistic, but that's what's really happening in the Muslim world right now. We're seemingly trying to get our honor from so many different places, and we think we're being sophisticated, just like, in the Quran, Allah says, people will come with innovations, will come with new ideas, and they say, oh, we're just like modern people. So my question to say, like, all you're saying is inspiring and all what you're saying is beautiful, but how do we bridge the gap between the fact that you can't score without a goal? So yeah, the theory is there to kind of show us where we need to go, but on the ground, right? Practically speaking, talking about system, what are the systems, the habits, the reference that we can apply as of today to get ourselves so that these ideas, these concepts, these frameworks are soaked into our bones, and it's not just something theoretical. Do you have any tips or tricks?
So, of course, for those of us who have children, in my opinion, this should be embedded from the start in the education we give our kids. So the notion that retribution comes with the quality of your intention, the fact that what you get, whatever it is, you should be thankful for. The fact that if you have nothing to share, you have nothing, period. The fact that you give it your all, you work extremely hard, and you are confident in that any issue will be the best issue. This we need to embed in their system from the beginning. For those of us who are already adults, for me, it comes through a daily practice where it's a balancing act. where you make sure that you put everything you can in any work that you take on, you do it reaching ihsan. And when I mention ihsan, I'm saying like 100%, 1000%. The target is not just to get by. The target is to reach excellency. If we are raising money for an NGO, how do we make sure that we raise the maximum and that every person that gave $1 is happy about this dollar, gets proper transparency about the distribution of the fund, and next year not only maintains his donation but increase his donation. I'm not only out to get by and reach like the target budget of the organization. I'm here to develop and to make sure that this money is allocated to expand, develop, and get even further to solve the issue we're working on. If I'm into medicine, if I'm in engineering, whatever the area, I reach for the stars. I reach for the maximum level. But at the same time, I know that the outcome of this work doesn't rely on my hand, doesn't depend on me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives. And because I'm confident and indifferent about the outcome, of course I hope that it's going to work. But my faith is not going to be shaken if it doesn't. My core is not going to be broken because I didn't receive the results that I was expecting or planning for. So you have this daily operational work that is at the highest cutting edge level type of framing, and at the same time, in your personal life, in your spiritual life, you always remember not to take anything for granted. And so every day you plan for it. So you have your 6 hour, 8 hour, 10 hour shift. And then you have an hour where you remember about this. You analyze what you did, how you could do better. You make sure that if your niyyah sometimes is shaking a bit, give yourself a bit more discipline on that. There's a game I play with the kids because all of them have tasks and chores to do at home, and they are so honest, mashallah, that they come and say, hey, I'm so lazy, I don't want to do it. I just don't feel like doing it, like doing the dishes or cleaning the floor. Plus we're gonna do it tomorrow again and tomorrow again. Honestly, Baba, I don't feel like doing it. I say, okay, I'm gonna give you a trick. Whenever you don't feel like doing it, do it twice. Clean the floor and clean the carpet. Do the dishes and then do the gas stove. That's so beautiful. That every time your nefs tell you like reduce work, he gets educated to the fact that there is no shortcut. And once you train, like any other muscle, then it becomes like an immediate response that there's no doubt that I have to do what I have to do. And once I have done what I have to, then I can do what I want to.
It reminds me of one of Mark Twain's quote that if your job is to eat the frog in the morning, then during the day, then start by eating the frog in the morning. And if your job is to eat 2 frogs, eat the biggest frog first. I think that's a little bit what you're saying. This is really interesting, and Jazakallah khair for sharing all of this, because I think we're living in a world where we have a lot of information, but we lack wisdom. We lack the ability to make sense of all what's happening. And one of the things that's making it increasingly challenging is that I'm of the opinion the world is not designed for people to thrive anymore. I almost feel like the closer you are to the city, the closer you are to the graveyard of the souls, where everything is fast-paced and people are just rushing in such a way that they don't have the time to have these long one-on-one conversation, dive deep into self-awareness, understanding the different parameters of existence. And here specifically in Quebec, it's even harder for Muslims because we have a government in place that institutionalized laws, just like in France, to make us second-class citizens, and that creates a sort of bitterness within the Muslim community that you can see it clearly. It creates this vicious cycle, right? What happens on the international scene foments Islamophobia. Islamophobia is translated into discriminatory laws, microaggression, and then you have people that are so busy surviving, don't have access to jobs, who ends up very bitter, and everywhere they go they're like broken glass. They hurt themselves, they hurt other people, they start saying things that they think are Islamic but are not even Islamic. How do we break that cycle?
Yeah, I would say at the Quebec level there are lessons to be taken and to be like drawn from the experience of France. Right now Quebec is in a very special place. It has an immensely diverse community of citizens, and it is at a status of like a kind of a crossing where they want to distance themselves or differentiate themselves from the rest of Canada, for the sake of their independence and their core values and their core vision, but at the same time they are replicating another form of influence which is coming from France. So all these debates about like religious neutrality, about like religion, about whether it should be visible or not, about like a form of secularism, all that, we should see what was the impact in France of when we opened this Pandora box. And the impact was that, well, basically the far right is governing the country. Not even the far right, a government who considers that the far right is too weak against Muslims. Wow. The French society has never been as divided as today, and people are arguing on a daily basis on how to send back migrants, on whether Karim Benzema should tweet about this or that. Should we take away his nationality because he criticized the government or because he supported Palestine? Can we measure the length of the skirt, or how wide the sweatshirt is, or is she wearing a kimono for coming to school, or abaya or a long robe or whatever? This is the level that France has reached. And if Quebec continues down that path, that's Quebec's future. So at some point there is a level of responsibility to be taken and a number of lessons to be heard about what has happened to France, where the country now is on the verge of falling into the far right slab. And it's already the case. France has lost its international standing and credibility. France has lost the common narrative that was unifying the people. France has lost a number of social and economic tools that it relied upon to uphold a certain set of values of equality, of progress. And Quebec, unfortunately, gets its inspiration from these toxic debates. And once you start them, you never know when they finish. So maybe there is a possibility for Quebec to find its own path, without looking at what is going on in France, but keeping also a form of identity, specificity, which makes Quebec, which makes Montreal such beautiful places to be, with such a diverse community where there is a common bond that is truly inspiring. And when people come to Canada, we should look also at the data that more and more people don't want to go to Quebec because they say, hey, look, I'm coming from France. I don't want to relive the same cycle. I prefer to go to Ontario or to British Columbia or even to Halifax, or let's go to the north because I don't want to live through it again.
Yeah, so true.
And same for the Muslim communities here. I think they really take many of the fundamental freedoms they have for granted. And this is a community I love very much, that I've worked with for years now. And I think that they don't realize how dangerous this is. Because once you let some of your fundamental freedoms go away, they never come back unless you resist. And then you chip away at the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Then it affects other religious communities. Then it affects other groups. The instruments that were used to demonize and discriminate against Muslims in France, they are now used against other communities. They are now used to dismantle any pro-Palestinian organization or any climate activist organization or left-wing organization or organization who criticize police violence or discrimination. The same instruments that we let go when it came to discriminate against Muslims, they took the society apart and were used after that for other communities. So I think really this is a reality check. I wouldn't say this is red alert. I would say this is orange alert. But at least in terms of dialogue, in terms of prevention, in terms of risk management, I would say that institutions and organizations in Quebec should do everything they can to prevent the region from falling over time victim to these debates, to these toxic debates that end up dividing everyone.
One of my good friends, who's the CEO of the National Council of Canadian Muslims, said that on this podcast, actually, that the reason why he basically took the job when he didn't want to is because his father, by the way, his whole family was evangelical and they converted to Islam after he converted to Islam. Very inspiring story. He said that his father told him that your daughter is probably going to be unable to have the privilege that we had. We are Stephen Brown, you are the last generation that will have the ability to benefit from all your rights and freedoms. And if you don't take a stand, then it's going to be a different world. And that's what motivated him to actually take a stand.
Wow.
So may Allah bless him and give him strength. But my question to you, and out of all the questions I wanted to ask you, I saw this as one of the most important questions, because I've always believed that the world is in such chaos most of the time because of a cycle, right? Bad situation creates strong man creates ease, and ease creates weak man goes to power, and then the cycle starts again. And now we're seeing a transition towards ease creating a lot of weak men. There's an ascension to power from these weak men, and they're kind of destroying the world and tearing it apart. And the good people who are looking at that don't want necessarily to get involved into the fight because they're afraid of having their heart to darken. Because it's really dark when you start going into dirty politics and all the risk that comes. I'm sure you can talk a lot about that. So the question here is, how does a Muslim or any average person who wants to be a positive change in the world and allow a more nuanced world to give everyone a space at the table, right, engage into the combat without allowing their hearts to darken?
Yeah, so first, I don't think this should be a process you go through alone. So the fact that you are alone means that you are exposed to a certain type of risk, and that you are alone when you need to manage these risks and handle these risks. You were taking the example of Stephen, and it's amazing that his parents supported him in that process. It's not the case of everyone. Alhamdulillah, I had that opportunity too. The fact that my parents support me, my wife supports me, my kids supports me. The having this makes me stronger, because when hardship comes, I share the burden. I get advice from them. I get advice from my imams, from my teachers, from the sister who educated me at some point, and so on. So when I need to take a decision, or when I'm facing a hard situation, I'm never alone. And I rely on them. And I also rely on them to check me. If I said something in a certain way, or if I made the wrong decision, I need them to check on me, to make sure that they give me nasiha to fix what I've done in the process. So the fact that we go through this as a team, and it's not like me being involved and my family separated from me, this gives me huge strength. And then after that, whatever project I take on, I have an exit strategy, because I never want to last. I want to make sure that I'm under the clock here. I have 2 years to reach that objective. So when I accept being part of an association, organization, company, or whatever, the first question I ask once we agree that we're going to work together is, when do I get out? What are like the key indicators that we need to reach so that we consider that I've done my job and I can move on? This number of members, this level of efficiency, this outcome. Okay, give me 2 years in conservative, inshallah. If I finish earlier, then you let me go earlier. And this keeps me like under high level of operational pressure, but spiritual and individual serenity, because I know that I'm not here to occupy the seat. I'm not here for the role. I'm not here for the business card. I'm not here for the status. And I have a symbolic gun to my head. Do your job, make your part, and then move on. And so that would be the recommendation I give to everyone who wants to get involved. Number one, stop being scared. As I said, scared of what? As long as you breathe, you can affect change. What are you scared of? Like bullying, loss of comfort, people criticize. What does it mean in the long run? It means nothing. Okay? So stop being scared, sometimes even of your own shadow. Number two, don't do this alone. So if you know that it's going to weaken your family, it's going to expose your family, it's going to play on your intention and the quality of your faith and all that, don't take that risk. Let someone else do it, or put yourself in a position where you are less visible, less on the forefront, so that you are in a safe place. If you go into it, especially in a leadership position, take advice. Make a shura, based and composed, i.e. a council to advise you, made of people that are strong enough to criticize you when you need it, and to check you and to support you in every possible way. And when you have a big decision to take, have a process for that, involving consultation with them and advising for them. And last but not least, always have an exit strategy, which keeps you focused and time-oriented to make sure that you reach the impact you were hired to do or enroll to attain, and then you never take comfort. You never sit down in the seat and say that I'm here. No, you're just like, you're done, man. Move on.
I love that. Now, there's an elephant in the room, and I think we have to address it. A lot of times, and that's just not unique to the Muslim community, I think it's to anybody, people are afraid of making mistakes. People have this imposter syndrome. They believe that they're not ready because they're not qualified, knowing that what makes you qualify is actually doing the thing you're not qualified for. But yet again, we become very emotional and irrational, and we just have analysis paralysis, and we don't budge because we're always waiting for, I don't know, the Mehdi to come and save us, or Marwan Muhammed to come and do the job. But my question to you is, practically speaking, what's your best advice to get people out of that rut and analysis paralysis and give them the motivation to understand that, hey, the condition and the weather forecast is never going to be perfect. You got to do the work regardless of how you feel. Like, what is your take on that?
Yes. So basically there is this false narrative that if you try, either you succeed or you fail. These are the two outcomes. And then if you fail, end of process. But it's completely a construct, because when you look at what we call success stories, whether it be in business or social change or organizations or community causes or whatever the project, you want to succeed and you have a clear idea of what success looks like. They never made it from the first time. It just doesn't happen like that. It's an iterative process. So it's trial, error, correction, error, correction, error, correction, n times until the correction and the series of corrections that you have operated clicks all the system together, and then it's success. So you build a business, you fail. You correct now the logistics, you fail. You correct now the accounting, you fail. You correct the market and the time to market and the marketing, and then you have an improvement. Then you correct the communication and the pricing and so on until everything is perfect and aligned for what you are trying to achieve, and then it works. So if people are stopped by error, is because they don't understand what the meaning of error is. Error is not the end of a process. Error is an empirical information telling you that in this specific system, that type of setup is not conducive to the result. Make modifications, improve. And even at the individual level, you start, you say Bismillah, you make a good intention, you have some sort of a plan, you know that it's never going to be perfect, but it's going to be improved over time. If you are in a public role, your public speaking skills are going to improve over time. You're going to have like hard times. You're going to get like some serious training. You're going to have moments where you want to shout, but you cannot because everybody's watching you. You're going to have times where the words are there, the emotions are there, the ideas are there, but they just wouldn't come out the way you want them to. And then you try to take lessons from that and improve over time. When I began volunteering for NGOs, I had no public speaking prior experience. The only public speaking I had was that I was like sending newspapers in front of a station, of the train station, because I was so shy. I couldn't even ask for the time of the day to like someone walking in the street. Then I said, okay, either I take a training, which I don't have money for, or I'm going to get a job where I have to exert this type of skill. Then over time, I learned how to convince people and how to structure a speech, a phrase, how do I make sense of things. And it took a number of years. And even now, my level between like French and English and Arabic is not the same at all. There are some specific spaces where I know I can perform and I can be efficient in my communication, and a whole set of different setups where I'm not. And so it's a work in progress for all of us. So instead of making excuses of I'm not perfect, I'm not ready, I'm not trained, I can't, I'm not skilled, I can't speak, I can't count, I can't write, okay, so that's the end of the world. Just sit in the corner and wait for Yawm al-Qiyamah, because if you can do nothing, then there's no point trying anything. But if you accept the idea that it's a process, you say Bismillah, you put together your plan, you start, you take lessons, you improve over time, and whatever comes out of it, you have the benefit of. Because you have the benefit of your intention and the effort that you put in, and you have the benefit of making progress along the way. And for whatever reason, if they fire you or they thank you and say, hey, Habibi, shukran, this was great, but we think you're better in the kitchen or better at IT or better in front of TV and all that, you know that it's coming from the right place and that it's not a loss at all.
I love it. And you're kind of reminding me of my journey, because I remember once I had a documentary made about my conversion to Islam, and it was sort of a hit across Quebec and Canada, even aired in France. I was invited for some different live TV shows. And as I was speaking and they were talking, I actually messed up a date that you can actually not mess up. To give you a bit of context, they were asking me about how I converted to Islam, and I said, it was in French, I said, le 9 septembre, not once, but twice, and full of confidence. I said, like, le 9 septembre, so like September the 9th, when in reality what happened was the 11th of September, as we all know. But the reason why I did that mistake is because my brain was thinking it in English, and I said it in French, 9 septembre, 9/11. It's like bad translation. And I remember leaving that interview feeling like so dumb and so like, oh man, I'm so underqualified. Who do you think you are to be in front of the camera? But then in retrospective, I'm happy I made that mistake because it gave me training and it allowed me to remember to be a bit more prepared and to make work prior to these types of interview, whether it is by visualization or just having key talking points, so that I humble myself. But I think a lot of people struggle with the idea that, you know, they are entitled to take their space because of an inferiority complex. You know, when the whole world is throwing dirt at you, you start thinking you're dirt. Like even Malcolm X himself said that the white man has taught the black man to hate himself. And we can even see it sometimes how Muslims like treat each other. My son, he says Salamu alaikum to Muslims when he walks on the streets because I taught him that the best of you are the ones who say salam first. And I'm not kidding. Most of the time, sadly, people just look at him, Muslims, right? And they're like, they don't know what to do. Yeah. You can see they're confused. And it's one of the signs of the end of time, actually. The Prophet ﷺ said there will be a time where people will only say salam to those who they know. And the reason why I'm putting this is just to add like texture to what you're saying, because number one, I relate with it, and number two, I think it's so important that we can overcome this fear of making a mistake, because you know people talk a lot about perfectionism. I'm a perfectionist. Every time I see that, you know, in my mind I have a translation that goes, you are insecure. You are just putting a mask of perfectionism to hide your insecurity because you don't want to make a mistake, because you're afraid of people like judging you. Yeah. And that's really what it is. But anyhow, one of the questions I wanted to ask you with regards to, you know, your journey is, how did you find your voice? How did you come to be who you are today? Meaning someone that galvanized the courage to speak when you saw a problem and not just be on the sideline as a bourgeois Muslim who's just, you know, looking at the TV as to what's happening.
Yeah, for sure, the parents. I never had like this complex that some have. I never had, because I never saw it in my parents. In my education, we didn't have much, but I never, ever saw my parents bow down, except to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
MashaAllah.
I never saw them accept
Allah preserve them.
a form of a form of injustice, whether they are affected or they are not affected. I never saw them like that. So for me, the idea that you should just shut up and accept never was there. So I have really no merit on that front. There was a story in France when we were kids, like kindergarten, and my mother, she's a midwife. She's retired now, but she was like working not too far. And at the time, we were all living together. There was no racial divide in our areas in France. Sub-Saharan African, Middle Eastern, North African, Italians, Chinese, Asian, all the whole lot. You were like socially in the same spot, and you came together. But in our school, my mother was speaking French because she's from Algeria, and they used to speak French there. My father didn't speak French. He's Egyptian, so he didn't have the language, and my mother taught him. But at school, the kids whose parents did not speak French got a specific treatment. So there was my best friend, Abdul Latif. He's black. And the lady at school, when he pooped on himself, she let him like that the whole day. And when she didn't want to change him, she said, Abdul Latif is sale. Abdul Latif is dirty. So I will not change him. And so she kept repeating it until I was singing it at the dinner table in the evening. And that's how my mother found out that this is what happened at school. Next day, she took her day off, came with my father, meet the parents of Abdul Latif to like work with them and help them. And she mobilized until the teacher who did this received a sanction, received another, a notice that this should never happen again. But when you see your mother doing stuff like that in any situation where injustice happens, and you see her do it, whatever the cost, whatever the impact, as long as it's positive and it's helpful, then you cannot grow up in fear.
Mm-hmm.
And you can never shut up when you see it yourself. Otherwise, you have no excuse.
Mm-hmm.
You have no excuse. And once I started like doing actual NGO work, working on discrimination, initially on police violence and racial profiling, then later on, the first time I challenged a minister, a government official in a rational, efficient, diplomatic manner, and I came back home and said, okay, these are just human beings. They have symbolic or political power, but I can, in that court, at the UN or at the OSCE or at the Council of Europe, they cannot kill me.
Mm-hmm.
I can respond. I can get my narrative in. I can make sense. I can raise attention on what is going on in that human trafficking issue, in that anti-Muslim racism, in that anti-Asian form of intolerance, and so on. And after that, just not afraid anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Until one day I got like on national TV, the far right was like just broadcasting my name all over the place with hundreds of death threats, and Marine Le Pen calling my name out on national TV and so on. My father had just called me, said like really neutral tone, Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Any worry? Anything we should worry about? No, nothing to worry about. Okay, alhamdulillah, Assalamu alaikum. And that was it. That was it. But when I would get off the TV stage and get like back in the back room, and you would have like the minister come and say, hey, no Arab ever talked to us like this, you realize what symbolic fear they receive anytime they see a black man, an Arab man, a Muslim woman responding like human beings do when they feel empowered.
That's very profound, subhanAllah. Yeah, thank God this is recorded, because I want to actually go back to this conversation and reflect, because what you're saying is so deep and there's so much wisdom in it. And God bless your parents again. I mean, because it goes to say, especially me as a father, how much influence we have on our kids, and we should never underestimate the things we do. And oftentimes we exclude them from our work because we're thinking, oh, they're going to get in the way or they're hinder my productivity. But one of the best things you can do is get them involved so that they can see, and not only can they see, but replicate it in the future. So, yeah. What is, in your opinion, one of the biggest challenges that the Muslim community is facing right now, whether it be internal or external, in your perspective?
Yeah, I would say like there are two main areas like really for improvement, because I think like from a social, economic standpoint, even religious standpoint, Allahumma Muslims are doing great. They have improved, they have built infrastructure. Many of them are in a situation where they can take action, build a business, support an NGO, raise a family, protect this family. So what our parents fought for has been achieved. If you think of it, they were coming from South America, South Asia, Africa, North Africa or Middle East, and they had nothing. They didn't even speak the language, and they were able to build a safe place for us to be educated, to go to school, to have a house, to have a roof on our head and food on the table. So they did their part. But we're in a dangerous place in two specific areas, especially in this time where Muslims can be constructed as a political problem for short-term electoral gain. So I think the weaknesses are two main. The first one is we lack a level of reflexivity about where we are and what role we play in a specific system. There is no strong sense of collective agency within the Muslim community. And there could be, because although this is an extremely diverse community, they care a lot about like very common issues of social justice, issues of racial justice, issues of empowerment and respect. Muslims care about climate change. Muslims care about helping the needy. Muslims care about marginalized community, whether it be First Nation groups that have been targeted by some policies, or whether it be migrants, whether it be elderly people left alone, or poor people in urban areas. They care. So these common issues, these common narratives are really unifying items for the Muslim community, even like not beyond, but next to religious themes and religious concepts. So there is ground for unity on that, but there is a very low level of consciousness of what we can achieve together and how complementary we are to one another. If you are an imam and you're leading Jumu'ah Salah, realize that behind you, you have 1,000 brothers and sisters of all walks of life, all different stories. All can contribute. You're looking for a doctor, he's right there. Looking for a baker, she's up there. Looking for an engineer, she's there. Looking for a physician, he's just right next to you in the salah. So this immense diversity is a huge strength, but we don't realize it. So that's where I put the emphasis, so that we build and we improve collective intelligence in the way we think of ourselves and in the way we act. The second is the lack of a prospective approach. We react to things instead of planning them. I'm not here to react to whatever someone else decided upon. I'm here to plan. I'm here to develop. I'm here to build. So if we don't have this prospective approach of what are the next issues coming up, instead of reacting when a cheap shot politician is making an attempt on demonizing Muslims, why don't we focus on what are the next topics? What are the key policy issues that we should be aware of, so that when they arise, we have a plan to help the society fix it? So that we don't stay in this passenger seat where we comment on what people do and what people say, but instead we organize, we build, we construct, so that strategically we are always a source of good, a source of khair in the society we live in. So these are the two areas. The notion of reflexivity and taking a distance, taking a step back to assess our strengths and weaknesses and increase collective intelligence. Second, work about the future. Handle the present, but look at the future and have an analytical, sound, scientific approach to what is prospective and how to plan for it.
That's very beautiful. One of my favorite writer, philosopher, thinker is Malek Bennabi, and he said something that made him very controversial in his time. He became very famous after he died, and he said that Muslims were colonized because they were colonizable. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. But define colonizable. If we look at Bennabi's vision, the notion of colonizability is much wider than just the mere fact of having military and political control over a territory. If you're colonized in your mind, if you are defined by what your symbolic master thinks and wants of you, you're done. You're not going to be able to defend a border, to defend a house, to defend a family if the colonizer is already in your head. If you are defined by the colonizer, you are owned by the colonizer. So if you are influenced by what the racists think of your skin color, of your religion, of your social status, of your culture, of your everyday way of living, of your food, you're done, my friend. Because even I have this anecdote of I was giving an interview to a Le Monde journalist, so that's the main newspaper in France, and we were eating in a, let's say, a Middle Eastern restaurant, and this is my food. This is my family food. So when the hummus comes, I take the bread, I dip it in the hummus after washing hands when we arrived at the restaurant. But the fact that I eat with my hand, like it completely unsettled her. And she was like polite, respectful and all that, but you could clearly see that it shaken her in the way. And I was saying, like, did I do something wrong? No, I didn't do anything wrong. But when you are used to eating with a fork and a plate and sitting on a table, when you see someone eating with his hand, it looks like something backwards or something lowly. And I should never think of that. The fact that we eat with our hands, the fact that we eat on the floor, it's dignified. The chairs have been created in a country where it was too cold to sit on the floor. Why should it define 7 million human beings? If we eat with our hands, because our hands are clean and our food is prepared to be eaten with the hand and it makes sense, and we share from the same dish, why should we have like an additional reference for people eating in a plate separately, like if they were in a specific lane individually, and the fact that we share in and of itself is different. So this notion of like being equal, respecting each other, but not being ashamed of who you are, where you come from and how you live, this to me is the first step, like to being free from coloniality in our mind. And when you think that what you are inheriting from your parents and your grandparents is dignified in and of itself, then it's a different story. When you are Moroccan and you know that the first university in the world has been built in your country by a Muslim woman, you have no lessons to take on education, except you are doing wrong. If you are from Mali and you know that here is the land where Mansa Musa was living, where this was the greatest African empire in history, you can never take lessons from someone who tells you or presumes to teach you about politics, about strategy, about what it means to be a leader. If you know that in South America there has been a theology of liberation and how religion and institution, in that case the church, can be an actual organic part of social change, you can never be lectured about the fact that religion should be constructed as a problem. And that's the first step of getting free from coloniality before even taking a physical step to get rid of the oppressors, to get human rights involved, and so on and so forth.
That's deep. So I have one big last question, and then I want to go into rapid fire question. Thank you for being generous for your time. Now, there's a lot of negativity and internal fighting amongst ourselves. As we know, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ asked for the ummah to be united, and Allah granted him everything he asked except that. So we know that unity is something difficult to achieve because of this from a theological perspective. Now, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't work towards achieving unity and working together. But practically speaking on the ground, what I found is oftentimes people think of unity as uniformity, meaning that in order for us to be united, we have to be the same. And oftentimes also when they talk about unity, is unity under their perspective. And if it's not their perspective, then that's not the type of unity they are interested in, which is very problematic because obviously we are all universes of experiences and we have our own perspective, interpretation, and there's no pope in Islam. But some people, unfortunately, sometimes like to act like as if they are popes, and they're able to say who's a Muslim, who's not a Muslim, who's doing the right way, who's an innovator, who's, the whole shebang. I find this extremely challenging because this is a time where more than ever, the Muslim community has to be united, put its pity party on the side and its differences on the side and work together. I always hear people say within our community, oh, look at the Jewish community. They are so united, but that's a myth. They're actually not that united. They actually have more sex than we do. They're just able to actually put their differences on the side for the greater cause that they're advocating and work together. How do we address this issue? Because this is making us weak.
Yeah, so I always have like this image where like we're the largest religion in the world. We are the largest religious community in the whole world, more than 2 billion people. And if you go to Mecca and you see like people wandering around, going to the supermarket and then walking and making tawaf and making salawat and all that, then comes the adhan, and you have like millions of people getting organized in a matter of seconds. They don't speak the same language. They don't even pray the same way. They don't have like the same origin, the same culture, or even like the same religious opinion on like even mainstream matters. But come Salat time, all of them are organized. So this notion that Muslims can't or Muslims wouldn't get organized and unite and come together for important issues, I think to some extent this is a construct that fuels itself. So when I give conferences or when I build a project in France or in Belgium or elsewhere, and someone comes and say, hey, we cannot work together. I say, you don't want to work with me? Yes, I do. I want to work with you. Okay, so what are you talking about? And this brother, he doesn't want to work with you. He wants to work. And that sister and that sister. So we can work together because we agree on what we're doing together. We agree on making salat together. We can agree on building a social project together, on building a masjid together. So when you offer two things, number one, a common narrative, and number two, a common plan from an operational standpoint, that's when people come together because they are clear on what they do together and that there is no condition on their personal opinion on secondary matters. Mm-hmm. You don't agree about the beginning of Ramadan. Let's agree that we eat together. We can agree on that. You don't agree about maybe like that point of Islamic finance. Well, okay, well, for sure we agree on a conservative notion on how to collect and distribute zakat. Let's do that. And once we pray together, we ate together, we organized Ramadan together, we built the masjid together, we shared finance together, then what is the remaining difference that we cannot handle together? We respect each other on what we disagree upon, and we work together on what we agree upon. And this gives huge strength, but it needs to come from you in a position where you organize things so that they are sufficiently open that anyone can come in, but sufficiently serious that we cannot take the project astray. And you need to be in a position of strength. So when you are in the one organizing the meal, you decide how to make sure that the menu is inclusive of everyone. But when you come and sit down and you say, I don't like vegetables. Okay, but I don't like meat. But I don't eat sweet. That's when you make an issue. And it can be even like something legitimate. I don't eat sweet because I have like blood pressure or whatever, or diabetes or. But when it comes too late and you are in a position of consuming instead of like organizing, that's where it creates a number of rising issue. If you are just a guest, that's totally normal. If you were the one supposed to organize the meal and you didn't think about this, then it becomes a problem. So I think that's a self-fulfilling myth that keeps going on, that weakens Muslim altogether, and that has a number of exceptions that we should learn from to be inspired. It never was a deen that is supposed to be uniform. The fact that it has this diversity, even from a fiqh standpoint, makes it possible for you to pray in South Antarctica or in the space or in the middle of the desert, because your religion has that level of flexibility and diversity opinion that makes sense for this diversity of situations. The fact that you can, for some of the schools of thought, get involved into politics and some others not, and some others should put the emphasis on charities and some others should not. This gives a huge flexibility to the Muslim community. And when you go to Turkey or when you go to Pakistan or Egypt or Brazil or whatever, you will find like small variations of the same deen. A unified deen with a diversified manifestation of it.
That's well said, mashallah. Now I want to go into rapid fire questions so that we can get to know you a little bit more personal. What are the 3 books that you love the most that are not, of course, the Quran and the Hadith book or theological books?
Yeah, so number 1, Autobiography of Malcolm X. That's a classic. That's a usual classic. Number 2, The Prince of Machiavel. Number 3, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, about like cognitive sciences, because that's my jam.
Okay, very nice. I actually have that book, but I haven't read it yet.
Read on it.
Okay, sounds good. It will be my next read. What's the best advice you ever received, and why?
Never worry about what they say. Worry about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say.
That's self-explanatory too.
Yeah. I like it. But when you are a public person, of course it makes like practical sense. But when your parents tell you this from the beginning, that's another story. Because then even like in your immediate surrounding, you can, okay, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say when I lie like that? What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say when I waste the food like that? Maybe at the canteen nobody will care, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cares. So how can I behave? And so that like even if I'm in like a bathroom, or if I'm in the plane, or if I'm like watching a movie, I say, okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like me watching this movie. That's a sure change one.
That's deep. Obviously you spoke about how your parents had a huge impact on you, but other than your parents, who had the most impact on you?
When I was like really, really young, so I said it, my father is Egyptian, my mother is Algerian, but when I was like on my own, I was an only child, a Moroccan lady took care of me. We were living in like really small rooms in central Paris. We call them chambre de bonne because they were for the maids, so we would share a room like that. And she would have one, and she had like a small gas pot like this with the pan, and she would cook me tagine in like one pot like this and teach me Arabic and take me on her laps and educate me, like, so all the values of what we love about like Moroccan culture, she transmitted to me at the time. And I had like these three influences. And Allah yarhamha, she died later on completely alone, because she was on her own, doing like cleaning jobs in central Paris and sending all the money to her family in Morocco. But every time I think about her, like I miss her so very much. And I see her like if she was in front of me. Her name is Khadija, Allah yarhamha. We called her Khadouj as a nickname. And so I see her, and she had like this like traditional Berberian tattoo on the front, and her headscarf, and take me on her lap, and her face is my image of goodness. And so every time like I have like this close connection to her. I knew her only during my first childhood years, but this was the family we had in France, because there was just like my father, my mother, Khadouj, and me.
SubhanAllah. It's beautiful. May Allah preserve her for all the great impact she had on you. What is one of the most pivotal moments of your life, transformational moment of your life, where there was a before and after?
Yeah, the moment I quit finance, the moment I left like the job unconditionally, and my wife like really liberated me from like that financial pressure on getting like the fancy job and all that. And it was pivotal, because for the first time I said, now I need to find what I want to do, not only what I have to do. And at the same time I said, okay, I never had a doubt that she was the right woman for me, but now I realize what she can be for me. Because we met, we were quite young, we fell in love, we got married, alhamdulillah, our parents supported us and all that, but up until then she was my wife, and now she was becoming my partner, my role model on some issues, my friend, my confidant even in my projects, and like also in a non-biased note, my elder sister, because she's a bit older than me, and I love this about her. And so this was a pivotal moment. That's where I realized that, subhanAllah, I can do anything. I can do anything if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me permission and gives me tawfiq. And my wife will never ever be a source of worry. She will be always a source of inspiration. I knew that, but now I see it. Alhamdulillah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we know in Islam that marriage is like the completing part of your faith, that's the manifestation I had of it.
That's beautiful. May Allah preserve her.
Ameen.
If you could speak to your younger self, who's trying to figure out the world and going about the journey of becoming what you accomplished and who you are today, what would you tell them?
Write more.
Write more. I love that.
And at the same time, the same time budget you give to mathematics and physics and engineering, give to Islamic sciences. It's gonna be very useful for you in a few years from now.
Okay, that's beautiful. And I know we're talking about rapid fire question, but Can you just elaborate a little bit more as to why write more?
Yeah, so basically I had this idea that I change over time. Not in the sense of like I lose my values or I lose who I am, but I'm a different person now that I used to be at 30 years old or 20 years old. I would laugh more easily. Back in the days, I would laugh on like light matters and superficial matters, but now I take many things quite seriously. And I like the fact that I don't remember who I was or how I was, but I like the fact that maybe I can document that. Maybe I can write to myself and I read what I started this project for 5 years later to make sure that, hey, remember, the moment you enjoy TV, you need to stop TV. Remember, the moment you enjoy the money, you need to leave this world altogether. Remember, even if someday this person will make you angry, remember what he did for you, or what she did for you, so that you remember that like the cause for disagreement is completely superficial. And so writing does this for you. It stamps kind of a written picture of something like really special, something really nuanced that you can look at later. But if you rely on your memory only, what you have is a story of what happened that time, a story that changed and evolves over time because of subjectivity.
That's profound. Love it. Also, writing is a way of crystallizing your thought and obtaining clarity, right? As to who you are, what's important, where you're going, where you're from, all that. So yeah, I love it. It's definitely an advice I'm taking to heart here, mashallah. It's almost like Allah made you say these words for me, because I've always believed that people who are well-spoken are also people who write a lot.
For sure.
And it's so underrated. Totally underrated advice. And it's the first time I actually hear someone say that.
We're a bit old-fashioned on that.
Yeah.
But for good reason.
No, it's 100%. No, I appreciate you for saying that. Allah bless your heart.
I mean.
And the last question, I could go on and on and on, but obviously we're limited with time. Last big question that I wanted to ask you, I asked this to everybody. If you could have a message that you can send to all of humanity on a big billboard, what would it be?
Question.
Sorry, I said question, not question. A statement.
Yeah, question everything.
Oh, okay, you mean question. Okay, I thought okay.
Question everything. Try to find the meaning. Try to understand things. And I mean it in three sense of the word questioning. Question out of curiosity. Get to know people. Get to know countries. Get to know the values. Get to know the food. Get to know everything. And in that respect, human being is a question-asking machine. If you look at children, they are always asking where, why, when, how, these questions. Curious. And it's part of a social and a quite destructive social process to silence their questioning. Say, not now, it's out of question. It's literally out of question. Even like the phrasing makes the question irrelevant. Shut up right now, we'll see later. Like, we silence their questioning as they grow up, and they accept to reach even like the age of young adults and even start working without questioning. And then the moment they ask a question within the company, it creates a form of like a really like a problem in the company. Okay, why are we doing this? Yeah, because we need more money. Why do we need more money? Well, for the shareholders. Why do we work for them instead of for the clients? And then you question everything. So question out of curiosity, question out of understanding. Because once you start like understanding the different systems of the world, we were talking about climate change, but when you look at the earth as a machine producing a higher temperature, using resources, when you look at it from systematic perspective, you try to make sense, you start making sense, and you know how we should change our way of life. If you look at inequalities and you ask why and how wealth is distributed, it starts a process that affects social and economic change in the society. So the more you try to understand and ask relevant questions, the more you are empowered as an agent of change wherever you are, whatever the issue you care most about. And last but not least, question from a religious standpoint. That's a direct instruction from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We created the world so that people can reason with it, can observe, can ask questions, and make sense of their life. So the fact that you ask questions gives you an opportunity at some point to find the truth from a metaphysical perspective, religion, faith, unicity, the truth from a social, economic, cultural, very humane perspective as to how you should live, why, and how.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for all your wisdom. You are truly remarkable, and I don't mean to say this to inflate your head, but genuinely I've benefited the most, and I think out of all the conversations that I had, this was definitely one of my most beneficial one, where I think left transformed and truly inspired, and I needed to hear these words because it's very rare in this world where we come across somebody who has so much intentionality as you do in building yourself from within with rigor and with precision and having that self-awareness. I find you extremely self-aware, and I find that very refreshing, and I hope that this podcast will reach many people, not for the sake of the views or boosting my channels. I couldn't care less. This is an experiment where the proposition that I'm trying to put forward is this: Muslims are sitting on a gold mine and we don't know it. And we have more to offer the world than the world has to offer us. But for us to be able to understand the value of what we have, we need to look at what we have, and we need to look within, not outside. And I think this whole conversation was all about that. So you've been very, very, very inspiring, and I just wanted to say that I'm praying for you and your family, and I hope, inshallah, that you'll continue to be out there leading, mobilizing, because I think that it's clear what Allah is using you for, and may He give you strength, and may He give you also the ability to have patience, because I know it's not always easy, and yeah, and you know, sabr in of itself is one of the things that elevates you, you know, like even in the Quran, Allah says, oh, you who believe, hold on to to patience and prayer. Like patience comes before the prayer. So I know we need a lot of that, you know, for those of us who are out there trying to do stuff. So Jazakallah khair. I don't know what to tell you.
No, thank you. Pleasure was mine. All mine.
I hope it's not going to be the last time, inshallah.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure, we'll see each other, inshallah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, my brother Marwan. Assalamu alaikum.